butt, metal barrel, and the flintlock mechanism, which is by far the most important part of the piece. The flintlock itself consisted of a metal frizz, the pan, this is where you were pouring the powder charge that was setting the weapon off, and the cock, this was what was holding the sharp stone known as the flint, that was what was creating the spark. So a soldier loading this weapon, he would have it up at the shoulder, he would begin the order to prime and load. He would bring it up and over to the right hand side of his body and flick open the metal frizzen with his thumb. He's then going to reach around to the black box on his back known as a cartouche and pull out a paper cartridge that would look something like this. Now historically blue paper designated a blank round, and we use blanks here at Fort George. Live rounds would have been white paper. The only difference, a live round would have had a 68 to 70 caliber lead ball sewn into the bottom. So the soldier's going to bring this up to his mouth, tear open the top with his teeth, and that was actually a requirement for joining the British Army. You had to have at least 2 teeth, one on top, one on bottom, in order to tear open this cartridge. So you're going to pour a little bit of powder into the pan, shut the frizzen to hold that powder in place. You're going to then pass the weapon about and down to the ground, pour the remainder of the cartridge down into the barrel, and then you're going to withdraw your ramrod, ram it down, tap twice, and then reseat the ramrod in the furniture of the weapon. So the musket is now loaded. The soldier is going to bring it up to the shoulder. The order will come out to make ready. He will cock the piece, present, fire. He's going to pull the trigger. The cock's going to fly forward. The flint strikes the metal frizzen, creating sparks. These sparks are hopefully going to land in the pan, hopefully setting off the prime, which is going to carry through the small hole known as the vent hole into the barrel, hopefully setting off the main charge and hopefully firing off that round. Now I say hopefully, ladies and gentlemen, because this is a very unreliable weapon. There's a 30% chance of misfire on a good day, and that gets worse with the weather or if you're firing more than once. So a lot of factors can influence this misfire rate. If it's a rainy or a humid day, the moisture in the air can be enough to render that black powder inert, so meaning it just won't work. Firing it off a lot, you get this byproduct that builds up on the inside of the barrel and in the pan, known as black powder fouling. Basically what that is, it's this black goop that builds up over everything, makes it harder for the weapon to function effectively. Firing this weapon a lot of times as well, the flint will become dull over time. Eventually it will stop creating sparks altogether, and you're going to have to replace that. So a lot of things can go wrong with this weapon. Accuracy is also an issue. So there's a maximum effective range for this weapon of about 150 yards. Beyond that point, if you get hit with the ball, it's not going to do much damage. It's only accurate, however, up to 75 yards. If I'm firing at a target, say at the wooden palisade fence over there, I can expect to hit my target about 9 out of every 10 times. Beyond that point, I can expect to miss my target 9 feet in any direction. So not very accurate. They did have more accurate weapons during this time. Rifles, which were accurate up to 300 yards. However, rifles took much longer to load than the musket. The musket was, in fact, known as the machine gun of its day. It could load and fire within 15 seconds. A well-trained troop could load and fire this weapon, so about 4 times every minute. I know, very impressive. But it was the technology of this day. It was at the pinnacle of military technology. I did mention the 68 to 70 caliber ball they are using. The barrels of the musket themselves are 75 calibers, so the barrel is significantly larger. That means loading this weapon fairly quick because they can just slide that round down very easily. However, firing it off, the ball rattles around on the inside and it can go off at weird angles when it comes out, and that is the reason why it is so inaccurate. The only difference between a musket and a rifle, rifles have this rifled groove down the inside of the barrel, and the ball is much closer to the size of the actual barrel itself, so it's a lot harder to reload. It takes a lot longer because they have to push down so hard to get that ball to the bottom of the barrel, but it is much more accurate because the ball comes out with a spin and it is flying straight. And rifles were in use during this period. They weren't all that common though, however, because they were so expensive to use and because that reload time was so much more than the musket, it was deemed more prudent to be using muskets than rifles. So that was actually why they were using the tactics of this day. You see long lines of men marching across the battlefield. You may have seen this in the movies. You may have wondered, wow, why are these guys doing this? It's rather stupid. Why don't uniforms. Well, as you will see, firing black powder weapons creates a lot of smoke. So you'll see how much is produced by just one musket. Imagine hundreds, thousands going off, cannons as well. A lot of smoke was hanging over battlefields of this day, and it was actually dubbed the fog of war. It made things very difficult to see anything. So commanders needed to be able to see their troops in order to see how the battle was going and to make decisions. So they put them in brightly colored uniforms to make them better able to see their troops. They did have camouflage during this period. The Glengarry Light Infantry, which is a local regiment, they had dark green jackets and black belts, so ideal camouflage for the forests of Canada. However, it came at a price. At the Battle of Lundy's Lane, the Glengarrys were decimated not just by American fire, but by their own troops. So British soldiers saw dark shapes moving through the fog and chose to fire upon them rather than take the risk that they were the enemy. And so the Glengarrys were pretty much wiped out at this battle. So camouflage was not necessarily a virtue during this period. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to fire off 2 shots for you today. I do ask that you stay on your side of the path while I'm doing this. I'll stay on mine. When I'm done, I will come back, finish the demonstration for you, and take any questions you may have. All right, thank you.
Better not misfire this one.
Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it, 2 shots of the brown vest. And again, you may have noticed the amount of smoke produced. You can just imagine what these battlefields would have been like. So soldiers during this period were actually armed with a secondary weapon, and that was the triangular socket bayonets. Could be fixed under the muzzle of the musket, made it a very effective stabbing weapon. And you did not want to be stabbed with this weapon because it is 3-sided. If you get stabbed, it's very hard for the surgeon to sew it up during this period. He can sew up 2 of those sides, but when he tries to sew up the 3rd side, one of the sides is going to pop back open and he's going to have to start all over again. So a very nasty wound to treat. You must also know, besides, that soldiers during this period are not necessarily cleaning their bayonets all that frequently. They would have been covered in grime, dirt, blood, you name it. So getting stabbed with this, the chance for infection is very high. Medical technology during this period is nowhere near the standard we have today. So any infection is basically a death sentence. If you get stabbed in the arm or the leg, the surgeon may be able to amputate, and if you survive that painful procedure, it looks pretty good for you. But if you get stabbed in any of the vital areas, if you're not bleeding out, you're going to die from infection. So this is a very nasty weapon, made it a very effective psychological weapon as well. You did not want to get stabbed with this. If you see a long line of men coming across you in the battlefield, they fire up a few rounds, then they lower their weapons, start charging towards you with their bayonets. What is your natural instinct going to be? Are you going to stay there and wait for them to get to you, or are you going to turn around and run away? Most of us are going to run away, and that is exactly what happened in the Battle of Queenston Heights. The British Army lined up again, across from the American lines, fired off a few volleys, and they charged with their bayonets into the American lines. Many of the Americans are inexperienced militiamen. Some of them chose to jump off the heights rather than face the British, but most of them surrendered, and it was a British victory that day. So that effectively concludes my musket demonstration, ladies and gentlemen. If you have any questions, feel free to come up and ask. If you would like a picture, I'll be staying around here for a little bit. Also, if you're interested, there will be a War on the Niagara talk at the depot, at the building right behind you there. You may see the guy in the red jacket, the officer there. So that's where that's going to be taking place if you are interested. If not, have a very great day here at Fort George. Thank you.
That was interesting.